The Internet, the World Wide Web, and HTTP. 1 Web Architecture, 2 Resource, 3 URI, 4 Cool URIs, 5 Representation, 5 Media Type, 5 HTTP 8 Moving beyond HTTP 1.1, 8 HTTP Message Exchange, 8 Intermediaries, 10 Types of Intermediaries, 11 HTTP Methods, 12 Headers, 15 HTTP Status Codes, 16 Content Negotiation, 17 Caching, 17 Authentication, 20 Authentication Schemes, 21 Additional Authentication Schemes, 22 Conclusion, 22 2 Web APIs, 23 What is a Web API? 23 What about SOAP Web Services? 23 Origins of Web APIs, 24 The Web API Revolution begins, 24 Paying attention to the web, 24 Guidelines for Web APIs, 25 Domain-specific media types, 25 Media type profiles, 26 Multiple representations, 27 API styles, 29 The Richardson Maturity Model, 29 RPC RMM Level 0, 30 Resources RMM Level 1, 31 HTTP Verbs RMM Level 2, 33 Crossing the Chasm toward Resource-Centric APIs, 36 Hypermedia RMM Level 3, 36 REST, 41 REST Constraints, 41 Conclusion, 43 3 ASP.NET Web API 101 45 Core Scenarios, 45 First-Class HTTP Programming, 46 Symmetric Client and Server Programming Experience, 48 Flexible Support for different formats, 48 No more coding with angle brackets, 48 Unit testability, 49 Multiple hosting options, 50 Getting started with ASP.NET Web API, 50 Exploring a new Web API project, 54 Web API config, 54 Values Controller, 56 Hello Web API, 58 Creating the service, 58 The client, 65 The host, 65 Conclusion, 66 4 Processing architecture, 67 The hosting layer, 70 Message handler pipeline, 71 Route dispatching, 73 Controller handling, 75 The API controller base class, 75 Conclusion, 82 5 The application, 83 Why Evolvable, 84 Barriers to evolution, 85 What is the cost, 86 Why not just version, 88 Walking the walk, 91 Application objectives, 91 Goals, 92 Opportunity, 92 Information model, 93 Subdomains, 93 Related Resources, 94 Attribute groups, 95 Collections of attribute groups, 96 Information model versus media type, 96 Collections of issues, 98 Resource models, 98 Root resource, 98 Search resources, 98 Collection resources, 99 Item resources, 99 Conclusion, 102 6 Media type selection and design, 103 Self-description, 103 Types of contracts, 104 Media types, 104 Primitive formats, 105 Popular formats, 107 new formats, 108 hypermedia types, 110 media type explosion, 110 generic media types and profiles, 110 other hypermedia types, 115 link relation types, 115 semantics, 116 replacing embedded resources, 118 indirection layer, 118 reference data, 119 workflow, 120 syntax, 121 a perfect combination, 124 designing a new media type contract, 124 selecting a format, 125 enabling hypermedia, 126 optional, mandatory, omitted. Applicable, 126 embedded versus external metadata, 127 extensibility, 127 registering the media type, 129 designing new link relations, 130 standard link relations, 130 extension link relations, 131 embedded link relations, 131 registering the link relation, 132 media types in the issue tracking domain, 132 list resources, 132 item resources, 134 discovery resource, 135 search resource, 136 conclusion, 136 7 building the API, 137 the design, 137 getting the source, 138 building the implementation using BDD, 138 navigating the solution, 139 packages and libraries, 139 self-host, 140 models and services, 141 issue and issue store, 141 issue state, 142 issue state, 143 link, 144 issue state factory, 145 link factory, 146 issue link factory, 147 acceptance criteria, 149 feature retrieving issues, 152 retrieving an issue, 154 retrieving open and closed issues, 157 retrieving an issue that does not exist, 159 retrieving all issues, 160 retrieving all issues as collection JSO, and 163 searching issues, 165 feature creating issues, 167 feature updating issues, 170 updating an issue, 170 updating an issue that does not exist, 172 feature deleting issues, 173 deleting an issue, 173 deleting an issue that does not exist, 175 feature processing issues, 175 the tests, 175 the implementation, 176 conclusion, 177 8 improving the API, 179 acceptance criteria for the new features, 179 implementing the output caching support, 181 adding the tests for output caching, 182 implementing cache revalidation, 185 implementing conditional gets for cache revalidation, 186 conflict detection, 189 implementing conflict detection, 189 change auditing, 192 implementing change auditing with Hawk authentication, 193 tracing, 197 implementing tracing, 198 conclusion, 201 9 Building the client. 203 client libraries, 204 wrapper libraries. 204 links as functions, 208 application. Workflow 214 need to know. 214 clients with missions, 218 client state. 221 conclusion. 222. 10. The HTTP programming model. 225 messages, 226 headers. 231 message content. 237. Consuming message content, 238 creating message content. 241 conclusion, 249. 11. Hosting. 251 web hosting, 252 the ASP.NET infrastructure. 252 ASP.NET routing, 255 web API routing. 257 global configuration. 259 the web API ASP.NET handler, 261 self-hosting. 264 WCF architecture, 265 the HTTP self-host server class, 267 the HTTP self-host configuration class. 268 URL reservation and access control, 270 hosting web API with ON and Katana. 271 ON, 271 the Katana project. 273 web API configuration. 275 web API middleware, 276 the ON ecosystem. 279 in-memory hosting, 280 Azure Service Bus host. 281 conclusion. 286. 12. Controllers and routing. 287 HTTP message flow overview, 287 the message handler pipeline. 288 dispatcher, 292 HTTP controller dispatcher. 293 controller selection. 294 controller activation, 298 the controller pipeline. 299 API controller, 299 API controller. Processing model, 300 conclusion. 312. 13. Formatters and model binding. 315 the importance of models in ASP.NET Web API, 315 how model binding works. 317 built-in model binders, 320. The model binding parameter binder implementation, 320 value providers. 321 model binders, 324 model binding against URIs only. 327 the formatter parameter binder implementation, 327 default HTTP parameter binding selection. 333 model validation, 333 applying data. Annotation attributes to a model, 333 querying the validation results, 334. Conclusion, 336. 14. HTTP client. 339 HTTP client class, 339 lifecycle. 339 wrapper. 340 multiple instances, 341 thread safety. 341 helper methods, 341 peeling off the layers, 342 completed requests don't throw. 342 content is everything, 342 canceling the request. 344 send async, 345 client. Message handlers 345 proxying handlers. 347 fake response handlers 348 creating resuable response handlers. 350 conclusion 351. 15. Security 353 transport security 353 using TLS and ASP.NET Web API 355 using TLS with IIS hosting 355 using TLS with self-hosting 357 authentication 358 the claims model 358 retrieving and assigning the current principal 363 transport-based authentication 364 server authentication 365 client authentication 368 the HTTP authentication framework 375 implementing HTTP-based authentication 377 Katana authentication middleware 378 active and passive authentication middleware 383 Web API authentication filters 384 token-based authentication 387 the Hawk authentication scheme 394 authorization 396 authorization enforcement 398 cross-origin resource sharing 401 course support on ASP.NET Web API 404 conclusion 407 16. The OAuth 2.0 authorization framework 409 client applications 412 accessing protected resources 414 obtaining access tokens 415 authorization code grant 417 scope 420 front channel versus back channel 421 refresh tokens 423 resource server and authorization server 424 processing access tokens in ASP.NET Web API 426 OAuth 2.0 and authentication 428 scope-based authorization 431 conclusion 432 17. Testability 435 unit tests 435 unit testing frameworks 436 getting started with unit testing in Visual Studio 436 xunit.net 438 the role of unit testing in test-driven development 439 unit testing an ASP.NET Web API implementation 443 unit testing and API controller 444 unit testing a media type formatter 450 unit testing and HTTP message handler 453 unit testing and action filter attribute 454 unit testing routes 458 integration tests in ASP.NET Web API 460 conclusion 462 A media types 463 B HTTP headers 465 C content negotiation 469 D caching in action 473 E authentication workflows 479 F media type specification for application/issue.json 483 G public key cryptography and certificates 485 Index 495 Forward